Hiya! Okay, so we're in National 5 Biology, Unit 2, Multicellular Organisms, and this is Key Area 4, Variation and Inheritance. This is going to be Section 1, where we're going to cover variation. Section 2 is going to cover inheritance. Inheritance is a very important topic because it is a mix of problem solving and knowledge skills that the SQA love to include as big exam questions.
It gets asked every single year without fail.
So let's cover variation first and the characteristics about that.
Okay, so again, here's the course specification of the stuff. Really, in this video, we're just really touching on A. The next video, we'll touch on B, C, and D, which is the more fun one, shall we say.
Vocabulary
but this video should be pretty short. There's very little to variation that you guys need to know about.
Okay, so we'll be looking at what variation is, the two types of variation within a species.
So by the end of this video, you should be able to state what is meant by variation. You should be able to name the two main types of variation. You should be able to describe the differences between discrete and continuous variation. Spoiler alert, that answers point 2. And you should be able to identify the correct graph for different types of variation.
Okay, so variation is the differences present between organisms of the same species. Now the dogs are under there below. Dogs are all the same species. We know they're the same species. We'll cover this in Unit 3, but we know they're the same species because they can breed to produce fertile offspring. But we'll cover that in Unit 3. Right now all we can say is it's the differences between the same species. Even humans, there's lots of differences between humans, and we are all the same species. Oak trees, I doubt you find two oak trees that are completely and utterly identical. They are all the same species as each other.
So, two types of variation. The first type is called discrete variation, and this is a type of variation that is controlled by single gene inheritance. So basically, the idea that one gene is responsible for that trait. So it's not a mix of your genes. There's literally one gene that says either you have this or you don't have this thing. It results in distinct groups, and what that means is it can be shown in a very nice bar graph. And usually it is you either fall into one category or the other. So a nice example of it is shown there, is the ability to tongue roll. Is either you can do it or you cannot do it. So it can go very nicely into a bar graph of this group or this group. Others examples include things like eye colour and hair colour, and petal colour is a nice plant example of that. But things where you either are one thing or the other, which is slightly annoying with eye colour because you kind of have a mix of eye colours. I have a horrible eye colour that doesn't make sense. But
in these examples, we are going to be saying, you're either this or this, but that's for biology. In real life, the rules are a little bit different, but in biology and National 5, we will say absolutes. Okay, continuous variation is controlled by polygenic inheritance. What this means is many genes are responsible for the trait. It results in a large range of results, and it is shown usually by a histogram, occasionally by a line graph, but mainly by a histogram. Now, what a histogram is compared to a bar chart is a histogram shows the direct relationship between the two factors. So essentially what you have is a kind of continuous characteristic along the bottom, but we can't say that it's an absolute line graph because they're not like 20, then 30, then 40, then 60. What we've got is ranges that we tend to group things by. Examples of things that are controlled by continuous variation. Height. So again, if you're thinking about height, is controlled by more than one gene because it's the length of your leg bones, your hip bones, your spinal column, your muscle configuration, depending on how it holds your body. Other things like shoe size, leaf length for a plant example, that's a continuous variation. So it's not like you either are 6'2" or you're 5'4". You're everything in between there. So for example, the smallest man in the world, I think he was 56 centimeters. Tallest man in the world was 2 meters 72. So 2,072 millimeters. Thank God I didn't get that wrong. Okay.
And also these things change over your life. Like you are not born the height that you are as an adult. In terms of like eye colour and hair colour is a little bit iffy in terms of when you're a baby, but generally from pretty young through the rest of your life, your eye colour will not change. Your hair colour, yes, it goes grey eventually, but doesn't really change. Whereas your height, it will change all the time. It's also important to note in terms of bar graphs and histograms, bar graphs have gaps between the bars. So it's like the bars on a prison cell, there is a gap between them. Whereas histograms, there is no gaps, all the bars touch. So if you're drawing one, don't draw the wrong one.
I did get my sum wrong. It's 2,720 millimeters, just to confirm. I can do numbers.
Right, so to summarise variation, not very much you need to know. You need to know the two main types, and that was about it. So discrete variation. It is a type of variation controlled by one gene and it shows a limited number of characteristics such as tongue rolling. So you either can or you can't.
Continuous variation is a type of variation controlled by more than one gene, which is known as polygenic. That term is important, and that shows a large range of characteristics. So for example, height, you go all the way from really tiny to really tall, and most people you find kind of in the middle.
And polygenic inheritance, just to clarify what that is the inheritance that is controlled by more than one gene. So for example, any type of continuous variation.
Okay, so that's the features of variation. The next video, probably more important in terms of exam questions, and that's going to be covering all of the things about inheritance. So how do you predict what offspring will be based on their characteristics? So we'll see you then.